Hi, everybody, and welcome back to Chee-Tash. My name is Chris, and today we're going to be continuing along a journey through The Clean Coder by Uncle Bob C. Martin. Today, talking about estimation and pointing stories or features that you are working on within your team. Last time we talked about time management and different techniques to manage your time throughout the course of a workday. We talked about having a good night's rest. We talked about how caffeine can affect your work. We talked about the Pomodoro technique. So, and much, much more. Check out that episode again in the playlist for the Clean Coder. Today, we're going to talk about estimation. So, what are estimates? Well, Uncle Bob will tell you that they are exactly that. They are just estimates. They're not anything that's supposed to be concrete, but sometimes people view them as concrete. And he says that this is what ruins the relationship between the business side of things and then the software developers. It's that it's scary and people don't really know what it means. As software devs, we do, but then communicating that to the business team, that's where things can maybe lead down a very negative road. So Uncle Bob outlines, what is an estimate? And there's a couple different ways of viewing this. So there's the business way of viewing an estimate, which essentially means that you are committing to something. You're committing it to get done in a certain amount of time. Now, there's also the other way, the way that developers view an estimate, which is just a guess. So it's not concrete, it's just a guess, and you're not committed to anything. So with commitment is something that you must achieve. If you commit to something, you say you're going to get it done by a certain time. And at the end of the day, professionals don't make commitments unless they can get it done. Everything about commitments is about certainty. This is when a business asks you about an estimate, they're thinking of, hey, get it done by a certain time. So now what about the other side of the coin, which is the estimate side of it? So an estimate is just a guess. Commitment is not implied. And if you miss an estimate, it's not like you miss a commitment. It's not a number that you give, but it's more like a distribution. So it's like a probability distribution. And this is how Uncle Bob advocates to view estimates. It's a spectrum of the number of days that it will take. And it's a list of, or rather a chart of possibilities. And it looks exactly like a probability distribution. Here, this picture here is taken just from the Wikipedia page for probability distribution. And you can see the likelihood of something happening in this chart towards the middle of the graph, the peak of that, what would you call this? The hill, I guess, of the graph. That's what's most likely to happen. So this is how you should treat your estimates. You should say, okay, the number of days it'll take, the middle here is going to be the most likely scenario. Then as you get to the extremes, those are going to be least likely. We talked about this before in other chapters in both, I believe, earlier in Clean Coder and maybe even in Clean Code about implied commitments and this word try. And the word try is a very, very finicky word in software development because if you say you're going to try to get something done, it's essentially like a commitment, and it means that you aren't already doing enough as it is, that you're going to try to get it done. You're going to lose sleep at night. You're going to miss out on family functions. You're going to work overtime to get it done. So trying can be a very, very troubling word if you start to use the word try. If you say, hey, I can get this done in 4 days, and then your boss says, well, can you try to get it done sooner? Okay, I can try for 3. So to try to get it to 3, it's going to cause a lot of pain and stress. So you have to be careful with the word try because you're implicitly committing to getting it done in 3 days. And if you don't, well, then lots of people are going to be disappointed there. So there's a system that Uncle Bob outlines where you can potentially get across your idea of when you can get it done. And it's essentially a best, a worst, and a most likely case scenario. And this was something called PERT that was developed by the Polaris Project, created to support the Polaris Project of the U.S. Navy. It's called Program Evaluation Review Technique. And it's essentially a trivariate analysis with giving your optimistic estimate, your normal estimate, and then your pessimistic estimate. So your optimistic estimate is, hey, if everything goes right, I can get it done in 1 day. If everything absolutely goes right. But normally, as conditions are as they are right now, I could probably get it done in 4 days. Greatest chance of success is that 4 days. Now, if everything goes wrong, nothing's going right, nobody's helping you, short of you going through a hurricane, a nuclear war, black holes, I can get this done in 10 days. And that's if everything goes wrong. That's your pessimistic estimate. And then what you do with that is that you make a certain calculation to see, okay, when is this expected to be done? So the expected duration of a task is going to be the optimistic estimate plus 4 times the normal estimate plus the pessimistic estimate divided by 6. This is going to be the expected duration. So, if my optimistic expectation is maybe 1 day, right? But then the normal expectation is 4 days, right? So that's 16. Pessimistic is 10, right? So 16 plus 117 plus pessimistic 10. So that's 27. So 27 divided by 6. What would that be? 27, 6. So 4.5 days-ish? Yeah, okay, so maybe like 4.5 days is the expected duration, taking into account the best, the worst, and the most likely case scenario. And then you can do a standard deviation of that, which is the pessimistic minus the optimistic. So 10 minus 1, so 9. 9 divided by 6 is, what would that be? That would be 3 halves. 3 halves, so that's the standard deviation of that's how uncertain we are. So standard deviations are like, if it's a high standard deviation, then you have a greater spread, which means you're not super certain of how long it's going to take. It could be pessimistic, it could be the optimistic, but there's a huge distribution between them. Anyway, sorry, it's been a while since I've brushed up on my statistical terms, but essentially I like to look at this number. I think this number makes the most sense to me, the expected duration, and that's the calculation using an optimistic estimate of 1 day, pessimistic of 10. Normally I can get it done in, 4? So expected duration of like 4.5 days. Essentially, you are setting reasonable expectations despite the pressure to try to go fast. Yeah, that's what Uncle Bob says. And a way to effectively communicate the estimates to the business team is to use this trivariate analysis. But there's other ways to do it too. So one way to do it is use this wideband Delphi technique, which is where you get together with other people, like a whole team-wide get-together, and you discuss and you estimate the tasks, and then you loop through the tasks if there's any disagreements, and you iterate until it becomes a consensus. Like maybe you talk about task 1, and you have people thinking that it's 3, 4, or 5. Okay, so then you loop back to it. Maybe you do a couple other estimates. You come back to that one. Okay, now it drops off. Now it's just most people think he gets 3 or 4. And you come back around the table and all of a sudden we agreed on it's a 4. This can take a while though, especially if you're in, focused discussion and discussing the nitty-gritty details of each one. Well, you can use this flying fingers technique, which is where you discuss a task and you discuss what might complicate the task, what might be easy on the task, etc. You discuss how to implement it. And then underneath the table while you're meeting with your team, you use your fingers and you do the estimate underneath the table on your fingers. So, if you think it's going to take 3 days, you put 3 fingers down underneath the table. And then somebody counts down, 3, 2, 1. You reveal your fingers, and then you take the average of what everybody said, everybody's estimate in fingers. So this way, people give honest answers because they're not seeing what everybody else is giving as an estimate. And that's where maybe you can get some potential bias in that people just agree with other people. Well, no. This way you can see, okay, we have everybody here giving a 1. And that way you can then discuss, okay, what is that person who gave just 1 for this? What do they know? What do they know that we don't know? Or maybe they are not on the same page and they don't really understand the task itself. And maybe they really, after giving more information to them, maybe then they change it to a 3 or something like that. But this way, people can give their honest answers. So you do not need a consensus for this. It does not have to be absolute. So that means in order to point out a task, not everybody has to give a 3. If you have some people giving a 5, some people giving a 4, some people giving a 3. Maybe you could all just say, okay, let's just split the difference. We'll just call it a 4, something like that. So that's the flying fingers. There's also another one called planning poker, which is similar to flying fingers, but you have cards. This was something developed by James Grenning in 2002, says Uncle Bob. And essentially, you label cards with the numbers that represent what you would use for fingers. So instead of using your fingers underneath the table, Uncle Bob says you can use the cards. And then once they count down, okay, we're talking about task 1. Here's what it is. Okay, everybody ready? We're going to point 3, 2, 1. And then people flip over the cards onto the table. There's also another one. This is kind of like the probability distribution we talked about earlier. This one is called affinity estimation, something developed by Lowell Lindstrom. And this is where the tasks now are written out on the cards. All the tasks that you have for that current sprint or the upcoming sprint are written on the cards. You place all the cards on the table or a wall. And then the team members don't talk. They just move the cards on a continuum, on a straight line continuum on the table or on the wall. To the right, we're going to say that it's going to take more time. If you put it to the left, we're going to say it's going to take less time. And anybody can move the cards, even if they've already been moved. And what happens is if you find that some cards are being moved a lot, you take them out and then you discuss them after the session. But if you find that you have cards that are staying in their place, well, then afterwards, you can then say, okay, time's up. Task 3 is on this card all the way to the right. What are we going to say this is all the way to the right? This is 5? Okay. Everything to the right here on the same level as task 3 is going to be a 5. And then you have some tasks all the way to the left. We're going to say, okay, that's like a 2 or a 1. Any of the cards that were being moved a lot that you took out of the discussion, now you can iterate and focus on those cards and come to a somewhat consensus on what those should be pointed, because those have been moved around a lot. Maybe some people had them on the left side, some people had them on the right side, but you can discuss those more intently now. This affinity estimation one is really interesting. I would love to see how this one goes in person. I've never done something like this. I've done more like the fingers one. I already forget the name of it. Flying fingers. I've done this one I've done kind of like the planning poker, mostly online. We use Teams and we just put in our numbers in the Teams chat once our PM counts down, like when we're pointing. So I'd be interested to try this affinity estimation one someday. This is something I could see you could use like a Miro board for this and have sticky notes of your stories, and then maybe have like 5 or 6 different sections, each representing 1 point, 2 point, 3 point, etc., and then move them around. I would be interested to try that out, actually. I've never done that. Next slide, and we only have one last slide to go, guys. The law of large numbers, Law of large numbers. So this I am a big advocate of. We don't always practice this where I work. I kind of wish we did. And it's something I interviewed an author of for this author wrote a book called The Bite-Sized Win Mindset. And I think I have it up here. Oh, yes, Derek Torrance. So if you guys want to listen to an interview where Derek, the author of The Bite-Sized Win Mindset, talks about this method of breaking up tasks, definitely check that out. It was a really cool episode, and the book is really great too. You guys can find that on Amazon. Really good book. I'd highly recommend it. And here, Uncle Bob talks about how when you have a large task, you tend to ignore the errors that could come about from that large task, or the challenges in the large task. Now, when you break them up into the smaller tasks, the errors or the challenges tend to propagate up. So if you point a large task, it's going to be less accurate than if you broke up that large task into 4 small tasks and point each of the small tasks. Those small tasks will be more accurate in their estimate because the errors and the challenges tend to come to light more easily, just by the nature of breaking it up into a smaller piece, because maybe as a large task, you don't think about all the potential roadblockers with it. But if you just take out a small portion of it and you're just looking at the small portion, oh yeah, now I can see the roadblock for it. So highly recommend listening to that interview with Derek or reading his book where he talks about, creating bite-sized wins and breaking things up into subtasks and making things a little more easier on the mind to comprehend and complete. Very, very cool book. And that's just going to do it, guys. That's going to be it for Chapter 9. So at the end of the day, devs, software engineers, etc., don't make promises you can't keep. It's very unprofessional, says Uncle Bob. And estimates should not mean commitments. They should mean probabilities. And we talked about different ways of going about and making estimates, whether it's with the sticky fingers, not the sticky fingers, but the finger pointing, or using cards, or the trivariate analysis from PERT, etc., or the affinity estimation. But estimates should be just that. They should just be guesses. And you shouldn't be caught trying to commit to something when you really are just estimating or guessing it. But that's going to do it, guys. Thank you very much for listening. Tune in next time. I think I'm just going to cruise through the clean coder. I don't think I'll upload another video on Eloquent JavaScript in a while, just because we're pretty close to finishing the clean coder. And I want to get that done because I have the next book that we're going to start after that. It's going to be kind of back to the same theme of some of the other books I've done. The One Thing, Subtle Art, the 4 Agreements, etc., with winning in mind. So yeah, tune in for that. But thank you guys so much for listening. We'll be back next time. My name is Chris. This has been Chee-Tash. Take care, everybody.